Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where this is a book review channel and we are doing our best to review all of the best books out there of every genre, find all of the best books, and today we're reviewing the book called Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Children's classic. It was written in 1908. First published then, so over 100 years old, and it is in the public domain, so if you'd like to read it, you can find it there. Although if you want a beautifully illustrated version, you should probably look at Amazon or the library, as the public domain ones are just for, I believe, the text. My version has some simple black and white illustrations that might be original to the text. So those might also be in the public domain. Give you an example. Here's a couple of them. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's our characters chasing off bandits. Let's find another one here. Here's Otter reuniting with his son. So this one has some, I suspect that these illustrations are the original ones, and since if they're that old, they would be in the public domain too, so you might be able to get one with simple illustrations, but more prolific, beautiful ones you'd have to pay for. Okay, so the plot. So I had never read this before I presented here, before I read it for this channel, but I vaguely think I had watched the cartoon that Disney made. It was Ichabod and Toad, or The Adventures of Ichabod and Toad, or something. They combined two short stories, one The Headless Horseman and the other one Wind in the Willows. A really weird pairing, but they were both short, so they smashed them together to make a long video. Anyway, my vague recollection of it was that it was kind of boring and slow and not terribly interesting. Vaguely animals driving around in cars. That's kind of all I really remembered. I also know Disney did a ride based on Wind in the Willows, and the only thing I remember about that ride, I do remember doing it, but it was that Mr. Toad was sentenced to hell. I mean, it was weird. They were descended into hell with demons and flames and everything. I mean, that was weird. Which has nothing to do with the book, because nothing like that happens in here. So I don't know where they got that idea. But again, maybe it was part of the cartoon and I just don't remember it. It doesn't matter. But anyway, it's been around for a while. So the plot. The plot is kind of rambling and slow, pastoral. You have, mostly it's focusing on four characters. It starts out focusing on Mole, who is a mole, an anthropomorphic mole, and I assume he's small, but it's really hard to tell sizes in this. I'll get to that in a little bit. But Mole decides one day he's tired of living underground, so he gets up and sort of runs away from home and wanders off and finds a river, and there wandering along the river finds Rat, a river rat. And they become friends. And Mole, I guess, sort of moves in with Rat, I think. And they just go on lots of adventures. They meet Mr. Badger and Toad of Toad Hall. And, each chapter is this kind of self-contained story. Usually, they have some sort of problem or idea or something, and then it's resolved by the end of the chapter. Not always. There are some that kind of continue on to the next chapter. But of the 12 chapters there, I'd say at least half of them are all their own self-contained stories with these characters. And that's one of the things I like about this book, that it's got those short stories, and some of them are very cute. Some of them are fun. Not all of them, though. There are some that are boring and I didn't like very much. But because they are kind of self-contained, if I were to ever reread the book, I would just skip that particular chapter and not feel like I missed out on anything. Or if I was reading it for the first time and you came across a boring chapter, it would feel like, oh, no big deal, the next chapter will get back to being more interesting. So I kind of like that. It's hit or miss as far as how much I liked each little story, but if I didn't like it, it wasn't the end of the world. I didn't want to put the book down and be done with it. So the story, the plot overall, probably the thing I like about the book the most. The characters are kind of in between whether I like it or dislike it. There's some aspects that I really liked. For example, they all felt like very different characters. For example, Mr. Badger seems uneducated, but in high standing, well respected, a voice of reason. Mole seems just very much a people pleaser, a pretty dim bulb, though, not a very bright character. The author does a very good job of making him seem that way. And Rat seems pretty practical, I guess, for the most part. And then Mr. Toad is a manic, totally impractical, excitable, doesn't have self-control kind of character. Anyway, they all feel very different. So I liked that about the author did a great job. Very different characters you got to know, and you get to know them pretty well. And, it was interesting seeing their personalities. They also had a little bit of character growth. Like we had Mole starting out as, pretty lonely, independent, and growing to be part of a group and loving being part of a group. And Mr. Toad starts out just being so ridiculously vain and boastful, and at the end of the book, he kind of ends up being able to have a little bit of self-control. Like he figures out a way to express his vanity and boastfulness outside of being around other people, and so when then he is with people, he will not sound quite so arrogant and conceited. So that's some character growth. So I liked that. The things that I didn't like about the characters is because they are very stupid. They do some things that you're just like, this is ridiculous. And it doesn't always come across as fun ridiculous, just more like, you are an idiot. Like Toad, his whole adventure, he steals a car, and then when he gets the next chance, he steals another one, so to speak, and crashes it immediately. And, he's just, again, that lack of self-control there. He's just like, ooh, shiny, and he goes and does something he really shouldn't. And how he gets out of trouble in that respect is kind of just ridiculous, because it should be well known where he's at, that the police could come find him, but they don't. Things like that. Okay, so that kind of leads me on to the things I disliked. The language in this book, I really have got to emphasize this is an old book, and because of that, the language has changed a lot, and it can be pretty difficult to read, especially for the audience this is aimed at. I mean, it's clearly aimed at children, but a modern child, I don't think, could handle this. And to give you an example of that, I decided I was going to read it to my children. And I read books to my kids all the time. I read bedtime stories, I read school, I read history books, I read stuff to them all the time. And they have never fallen asleep while I have read to them, except on this book. I got like 10 pages in and I look over and my 10-year-old is snoring. He's not sick or anything. It was too difficult to understand what was going on at the beginning. The language was too foreign. There were too many words that weren't clear. And after a while, it just became this monotone buzzing of mom, just blah, 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 and he fell asleep. So I'll give you some examples. The first example is just going to be a couple of sentences on page 17. And this is just to show specific words in here. So Otter has come to talk with Mole and Ratty as they are having a picnic. Okay? Greedy beggars, Otter observed, making for the provender. Why didn't you invite me, Ratty? This was an impromptu affair, explained the Rat. By the way, my friend, Mr. Mole. Proud, I'm sure, said the Otter, and the two animals were friends forthwith. Such a rumpus everywhere, continued the Otter. Okay, so in those 4 sentences, each sentence contains a word that the average 8-year-old probably wouldn't understand. And because it was so, like bullets of words you don't get. So the first one, provender. That's not a common word at all. Impromptu, well, you probably know what that means, but would a child? As an introduction, Otter says, proud, I'm sure. Again, it's not the words that are the problem, it's the phrasing. What does that mean? A modern child would be like, what? What is he saying? Why did he say that? In the next sentence, two animals were friends forthwith. Again, that's not a common word. And then the final sentence, such a rumpus everywhere. Again, would a child know what rumpus meant? So it's too many either old-fashioned or complicated words, I think, for a young child. So my idea on this is it's the audience, it's got a problem. The audience it was originally aimed at kind of doesn't exist anymore. The young child, like 8-year-old, who might be interested in the story, I don't think would get past chapter 1 without just putting it down and going, I don't even know what I read. An older child, like a teenager, could probably plow through it and understand what was being said, but would they ever pick it up? So it's kind of lost its audience is a problem. I will also give you one more example. The author doesn't just have language issues, it also has rambling issues. So this is much later in the story, starting on page 143, and I'll go through page 145 at some point. So I'm just going to read this paragraph. Yes, I'm not even going to get through the paragraph. Everything I'm going to read is one paragraph. And this just kind of gives you that scenery that if you were reading this, would you just kind of skim over and, it just like goes in one ear and out the other because it's not moving the story forward. By this time their meal was over, and the seafarer, refreshed and strengthened, his voice more vibrant, his eye lit with a brightness that seemed caught from some faraway sea beacon, filled his glass with the red and glowing vintage of the south, and, leaning towards the water rat, compelled his gaze and held him body and soul while he talked. Those eyes were of the changing, foam-streaked gray-green of the leaping northern seas. In the glass shone a hot ruby that seemed the very heart of the south, beating for him who had courage to respond to its pulsation. The twin lights, the shifting gray and the steadfast red, mastered the water rat and held him bound, fascinated, powerless. The quiet world outside their rays receded far away and ceased to be, and the wonderful talk flowed on, or was it speech entirely, or did it pass the time into song? Chanty of sailors weighing the drippy acre, sonorous hum of the shrouds, enteering northeasterner, ballad of the fisherman, hauling his nets at sundown against an apricot sky, chords of guitar, and Madeline from the gondola, or kayak. Did it change into the cry of the wind, plaintive at first, angrily shrill, as it freshened, rising a tearing whistle, sinking to a musical trickle of the air from the leach of the bellied sail? All these sounds the spellbound listener seemed to hear, and with them the hungry complaint of the gulls and the sea mews, the soft thunder of the breaking waves, the cry of the protesting shingle, and it goes on and on. So what did you get out of that? A whole bunch of very poetic speech that said a whole lot of nothing, really. Did you, after I stopped there, could you have summarized what I just said? And I don't think so. The author rambles. He really likes his long, poetic descriptives of nothing, including lots of poetry throughout. And I pretty much skipped over reading the poetry because I didn't care that much about what he was doing poetry about. So anyway, the conclusion on the language part is something I didn't like. I felt it was too verbose and difficult for children, maybe even some adults. There were some words in here that I'm just like, I'm not even sure what it was. At the very beginning, they're talking about boating, and they used some words I think is particular to boating, and I have no idea what they were talking about because I'm not somebody who boats. I don't sail, I don't do a rowboat, whatever. So whatever they were talking about, the sculls, what are the sculls of a boat? I don't know. So things like that are just, it just makes it hard to read. There were some unexpected things about this book. So I was expecting it to be all about the animals as they, go about in cars and on boats and whatever, and it's just a world populated by animals. But randomly, in the middle, there is a mythological creature that pops up. A demigod, Pan, the satyr that, part goat, part human, with a piping flute and everything. And you're just like, where did this come from? It's so weird. Yes, this the only mythological thing that happened in here. It just a brief moment of a story, and it felt very out of place. My other weirdness was humans. So again, the first half of this book, you don't encounter any humans, so you assume there are no humans. And then later on, Toad gets arrested, and it turns out the jailer's daughter is a human. And I kept going, is she a human? I'm not positive. It doesn't flat out say she's a human, but it comes across like she's a human because she kept referring to him as animals, and she loves all the animals. And you're like, are you not an animal? And then later on, it explicitly says that Toad encounters a man, and the illustration in the book is a human man. So you're like, obviously humans coexist with the animals, but it wasn't clear. It was weird. And speaking of that kind of situation, you have kind of the reverse situation. So all these animals that talk and whatever, and then you have a situation where the animals have pets or something. They go out and crash a wagon. And in the process of doing so, there's a little cage with a bird in it. And you're sitting here thinking, is this not a talking bird? Is it just an animal? But when they crashed, they go and pick up the cage and the bird is in there pleading to be let out. Of course, they don't let it out. They just carry it out. And then later, a page later, they're still holding the cage with the bird hysterically sobbing, and they totally ignore it. And it was weird. I mean, seriously, you're like, do you keep them as slaves? Why do you have a bird captured in a cage that you will not let out that's sobbing about it? It was just weird. Same thing with the horses. Like, at first it's like, they say they have to go out and catch the horse, and then they saddle it up. And so I'm thinking, okay, is the horse just a horse? But then later on, they're talking with the horse. And they even mention something about like paying a horse. But later on, Toad captures a horse and doesn't talk to it and then sells it to somebody. And you're like, again, this is this weird, is this an animal or is this a person? What are you doing here? So there was a lot of confusion to me here on exactly what the place of animals were. Obviously, they ate animals. There was even another weird one where Otter is in the middle of talking to Mole and Rat. This is the same picnic thing that I kind of read earlier. And he starts to tell a story, and mid-sentence, he's in the water and gone, and is not back for several more chapters. And at the time, the other animals kind of look at it and go, oh, well, whatever, and start talking. And you as the reader are like, what happened to Otter? At first I was like, he fell in the river and will be right back out. But he never came back out. Did he jump in the river to get away from the conversation? Except it seemed like he was interested in talking. Was he eaten? Did somebody eat Otter? Except then he shows back up later in the story, so I'm guessing that can't have been what happened. I have no idea what was going on there. It's just weird things like that in the book that just seem to throw you out where you're like, what is going on here? I don't actually understand. So I didn't like that. Let's see. There were a couple of narrator interjections where the story is going along somebody's saying, and I'll just make up something because I can't remember exactly what it was, but something's like, and they decide not to brush their teeth. And then the narrator interjects in parentheses, but we know brushing your teeth is good for you. And then goes on. And you're just like, that's weird. I don't like it when narrators do that. So, yeah. Overall, there was more I disliked than liked. This is a kind of historical book that if I was going to do a list on books that everybody should read at least once in their lifetime because they're historically important, I would include this book because it seems like a historically valuable book. As far as a fun book, it was just okay for a modern adult reader. It would be something that, if you want to be a completionist in life and have things that are culturally relevant, that kind of thing, then I would recommend it. But that's not really what my list is about. I'm trying to find the best of books, and I really just don't think this qualifies. I had too many things I disliked about it or had issues with. So overall, I'm just going to give it an okay. It wasn't horrible, but it was just okay. There was enough that I have complaints about that I'm not going to give it a huge thumbs up. So yeah, that's my overall view on this. I'm kind of sad to say that because it is so popular and well known and everything, but that's just the way it is. So on to part 2. What I'm going to do next is a fantasy. It's kind of a new book, The Teller of Small Fortunes. It sounds like it's supposed to be a cozy fantasy, which sounds like a lot of fun. I would love to read a cozy fantasy. So that's going to be my next choice, and we'll see how that goes. I hope you join me next week. Thank you for watching.